Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. If I may call Mr. Ascott.
If you'd just like to stand. If you repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Sit down.
Mr. Ascott, as you know, my name is Sam Stevens and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please could I ask you to state your full name?
Mark Andrew Ascott.
And thank you for giving evidence to the inquiry today. I want to start with the bundle of documents in front of you. You should see a witness statement, and that is dated the 9th of August 2022.
Yes,
And at page 24 of that statement, is that your signature?
yes it is.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
To the best of my knowledge and belief, yeah.
Thank you. That now stands as your evidence to the inquiry, but I will be asking you some questions, not on all parts of it, and in particular I won't be asking you questions today on the elements related to Horizon Online, or at least not in any depth. In your witness statement, you say that in August 1998 you worked for a Fujitsu business called the Solution Centre. Is that right?
That's correct.
At that stage, could you summarise what qualifications you had for relevant to IT?
So, as a member of the Solution Centre, I was assigned to various projects which would be involved with integrating, implementing and testing solutions for customers. So at the end of August, I had completed 3 years on assignment to Barclays Investment Bank, where we had migrated them from 40 locations around Tower Hill and Royal Mint Court down to Canary Wharf. So I'd been involved in assisting a senior technical design authority in implementing NT domains and providing workstations and configuring workstations which were rolled out to the various BZW teams for their use in their new location.
Thank you. And you say you were assigned to ICL Pathway from the Solution Centre between September and December 1998 to work on testing.
That's right.
What specifically were you testing at that point?
I was testing network access and the ability for the network to be robust to withstand sort of attacks, so man-in-the-middle type attacks, those types of spoofing IP addresses to spoof devices that shouldn't be accessing. I was doing those types of tests.
So you weren't testing the EPOS application?
No.
So as you say, you transferred to the Pathway organisation, you say, in January 1999, and you worked on the Secure Builds development team, which we'll discuss in due course. But that was under Alan Dalvarez, was it?
That was under Alan Dalvarez, yes.
And it was in the security domain.
That was my belief, that Alan was looking after the security implementation.
You then say in 2000 you moved to work for a team known as Infrastructure Products Development Unit. What role did that entail?
Well, initially I continued with the secure builds. So I was the secure builds development team. I worked in the Bracknell office. But I eventually was moved across to work in the Feltham office, reporting into Pete Druitt and Ian Morrison.
Thank you. We'll come to deal with that team in a moment. You left the post office account in August 2005,
I did.
and you returned, I think, in July 2008,
That's correct.
and you went on to work for Horizon Online. Work on Horizon Online.
Yes, I did.
Just one point on that. Around May 2000, well, in May 2009, there was an article in Computer Weekly by Rebecca Thompson, which criticised the legacy Horizon IT system at that stage. Were you aware of that article at the time?
I don't recall that specific article. I would have been aware that Computer Weekly and Computing would be writing articles, but I wasn't taking much notice of those.
And it wasn't sort of spoke about in the office that a core product that your account was working on had been criticised by a trade journal?
I think there would have been discussion within the office, but for my part, I tend not to believe what journalists write. For me, when I started working for ICL in 1978, I read religiously Computing and Computing Weekly. But over time, I just believed that those publications were biased against ICL. So it wouldn't have been a surprise to me that there would have been negative articles in those publications.
Right, I want to move to your witness statement. If we could bring that up, please. It's WITN 047600100 and paragraph 34, please. Thank you. Apologies, that's the I have the wrong reference. What I will do is say this. In your statement, you refer to you say you recall that high-level test plans and test reports included post office staff as recipients and reviewers of draft and approved documents. Yes?
Yes,
Was that in relation to Legacy Horizon or Horizon Online?
would have been Horizon Online.
In respect of Legacy Horizon, would that statement have held true?
I'm not sure on that. I wasn't part of the testing team down at Feltham that would have been testing with counters. So I am aware that post office staff did work closely with the SV&I team.
But you didn't have direct...
But I didn't have direct involvement in the production or necessarily the reviewing of those documents.
And does the same apply for design and development documents as well?
I would say the design documents around the security solution that I would have been involved in didn't generally include post office recipients.
I want to then, in your statement, you, under a heading, give quite a lot of detail on the testing that you say you were involved with as part of the Horizon IT system. Was that the testing you did for the network matters you discussed earlier?
No, the testing that I'm referring to in my witness statements are mainly based upon my experiences of Horizon Online.
Horizon Online, not Legacy Horizon.
So I was aware of the testing team in Feltham where the system tests, the SVNI test rig. There was also a test rig that was dedicated to supporting performance testing. And there was also a test rig that was used for release testing. So I met and worked with a number of the people in the test team in my role as a developer in supporting them to diagnose defects with the products which myself or my team had caused them to find.
Could I just stop there? You refer to test rigs, just in lay terms, or for a non-expert. What exactly is a test rig?
My definition of a test rig is a combination of platforms and servers which are going to replicate the systems which will be used in the live service. And in relation to Legacy Horizon and Horizon Online, a combination with counters. So some rigs would not necessarily have counters. You may create a what we would refer to as a harness, where that just involves servers, such as when I was looking after FTMS, we could have a test rig that just involved the local FTMS gateway and the remote FTMS gateway. And
Just on that, can you explain what FTMS is?
FTMS was the file transfer managed service application used to move data from the database servers to other servers that would kind of process that data.
Now, so you've given us a definition of what the test rigs are and some of your involvement in it. Did you have any involvement in, or do you have any knowledge of how the process of balancing was tested?
No, I wasn't involved in the sort of counter operations and the transactions and the processes during Horizon Legacy system or even Horizon Online. I did have more involvement with counters during Horizon Online, doing performance testing. That would have involved creating scripts which could be driven through a tool. We used Load Runner to create a load, and those scripts would have embedded counter transactions, and part of that would have involved processing of data created by the counter transactions within the data center systems, primarily the database servers.
So in essence, what we have here is it's a high-level description of testing, but your working knowledge of testing for Legacy Horizon is not strong.
Yeah. So in the secure builds side where I was working, I was generating scripts which would translate the policy files and requirements around the security needs that would result in the platforms being built in the test rigs in a manner that was going to replicate the live service. So,
well, I do want to come to that shortly. Before moving on, you refer to something in paragraph 31 of your statement, Maestro 24/7 batch scheduler.
yeah.
Was that a Legacy Horizon matter?
It was an application as part of the Legacy Horizon solution which coordinated jobs that would be run in a 24-hour period in a sequence that enabled data to be harvested and collected and then processed by the various subsystems.
So you've already mentioned from testing that defects would be raised and they would need to be addressed by development teams, and that was through a system called Pinnacle.
It was.
And that's a repository to log these identified defects and maintain a central point of what has been done to investigate them and resolve them. Do you agree with that?
I agree that Pinnacle was that system that was used for defect management.
We've heard evidence about individual pinnacles being prioritised. Mm-hmm. Do you recall, firstly, who prioritised them in your team?
That could be a combination of people within the team. It could be the programmer that was responsible for that product. It could be myself and that programmer. It could be that we would seek guidance from the senior designers that were available to us, just to identify what the true impact would be.
And how would you go about prioritising those pinnacles?
In terms of how quick we could fix them, one of the things which we learned over time was what business impact they would have, but initially we were making assessments on that's a typo, we can correct a typo very quickly and easily, or that's going to be a complex piece of work to fix, and we would generally in those situations turn to the designers to guide.
So sorry, for the more complex fixes, would they be prioritised higher or lower?
They would likely be prioritised higher.
So the easier ones prioritised lower, but you weren't assessing that on business need initially?
Not initially. In the secure build space where I was working, the defects that would come back to myself would usually prevent part of a test rig from being built, or it may prevent a test rig from being built at all. So clearly, if it was an issue where the test rig couldn't be built, that was important and that would be prioritised highly. If I had made a typo, a group had been named incorrectly, or a user account had been specified incorrectly, that would have been a lower priority defect and would have been fixed in accordance to the priorities that were set at the time.
And are you aware of anyone outside of ICL Pathway who had access to the Pinnacle database?
I'm not aware of anybody that wasn't a member of Pathway having access to the Pinnacle system.
So the inquiry has heard evidence this week concerning problems with EPOS and that application, one of which was related to the malformed or incomplete messages created by Riposte. Were you aware of that at the time?
No, I wasn't.
When did you become aware of issues with Riposte?
I think I would have been aware of Riposte issues around about 2001, 2002.
And why was that?
Working more and more in Feltham, I had the wider Pathway design and development team around me. So I would have likely encountered people that would have been involved, designers that would have been involved in that counter solution, and there would have been chit-chat in the canteen, that type of thing.
So, in around 2001, 2002, is this roughly the point where you started attending the morning prayers meetings?
Certainly, once I had taken on responsibility for managing the infrastructure teams which I listed in my statement, there was a higher chance that one of those applications would require some representation at morning prayers.
Could you just so we can hear it, why was it called morning prayers?
Simply because it was a very early morning meeting. I guess the reference goes back to sort of the religious context of morning matins and
What did you do in the meetings?
I would attend with other attendees. I would listen to the issues that were being described there. Some may not involve me at all, but if there was an issue that was affecting the application set that I've listed in my witness statement, then the likelihood is I would be asked to take away and investigate what could be done to resolve a pinnacle as quickly as possible.
Could you just take us through the application set in non-expert terms, as it were, to say what you were actually responsible for at these morning prayer meetings?
Yeah, so secure builds, which was defining the NT domain structure, putting together the secure roles and secure role templates, defining the access control lists which would be implemented against the NT platform set. FTMS, which I've described, the file transfer managed service, that application was used to move data, for example, the tip data from the database servers across to the post office systems. FTMS was also used to move data to GiroBank for onward processing from GiroBank. Audit dev, so there was the audit and archive solution, which was responsible for collecting data which would be stored for a period which I knew to be 7 years. And there was a set of definitions as to which data should be collected and recorded in that repository. Maestro Dev, as we've touched on, so that the driving part of the solution that kept the data flowing as and when it needed to be during the 24-hour cycle. The other area that I was involved in was the auto configuration database. So that was a database that the counters would call into when they were being built, and on the counter there was a utility called PC config and Europa. Europa would do checks and trigger PC config as needed for a new build counter. PC config would connect, and then, if you like, the personalisation data would be provided by the auto config database to that counter.
So if and when there were discussions on problems with riposte and or the EPOS application, would you be involved in those conversations other than as a listener?
I wouldn't have been involved in those conversations other than a listener.
And at the morning prayer meetings, was this solely limited to people employed by ICL Pathway and later Fujitsu?
Yes, all the representation there would have been ICL or Fujitsu people.
You mentioned then that one of the areas over which you had responsibility was audit. Would you have been responsible for, or would that have included the audit of actions taken by support services such as the SSC?
I believe so.
And presumably that also refers to audit for recording transactions that are carried out in post office counters as well.
Yes, and the movement of data. So, when, for example, FTMS would collect files from the database servers, that data would have been recorded and stored in the audit servers.
Was there a record of, an audit record of keystrokes that a sub-postmaster would use when using a Horizon terminal?
That I don't know.
Could you tell us what the ARQ audit data contained?
No, I wouldn't be able to tell you what data is recorded in. I believe it would include a PAN number, like the unique number associated with a debit card or a credit card. But whatever data it would record, I don't know.
Can I then turn? I want to turn to the secure build Windows scripts and the secure build. I think secure build dev it's referred to in the documents. Is that the team?
Yeah, secure builds was what we were known as. The dev was implied.
We've heard from Fujitsu employees this week evidence stating that it would be necessary for third-line support to have write access to counter systems. Would you agree with that?
Yep, I would.
Subject, of course, to proper control over its use.
Yeah, so the requirements for the secure roles were recorded in the document RS Rec 12, which I think Alan Dalvaris authored. And that document there identifies the secure roles that needed to be created and listed, if you like, the attributes of each secure role. So,
could we bring up FUJ 3087994, please? Is this the document you're referring to?
yes, that's right.
And it's, as you say, it's drafted by Alan Dalvarez. Did you have any input into it?
I think I would have had discussions with Alan to sort of, if you like, shape what that group definitions would look like.
We don't need to turn it up, but in your witness statement, you say at paragraph 20, I regarded the security architects I worked with as subject matter experts and deferred to their knowledge and design thinking. If I did not understand part of their designs, I would discuss my concerns with them so that I could gain a complete understanding of their designs. Once the NT domain designs were approved by the senior design team in Fujitsu and were due to be taken forward, I developed tooling and scripts that were used to implement the secure builds on the various Windows platforms.
Yeah.
So is this saying that you would use this document and when you say the security architects, is that referring to Alan Dalvarez?
No, I'm referring to Belinda Thairthorne there. So Belinda was ICL's senior security architect. Certainly in 1990, I was part of an organisation in which Belinda was a key member of the senior architects group, and we reported into ICL's chief technology officer at the time.
And she was the person who wrote the access control policy.
She certainly contributed to that production of that document, yes.
But when it came to designing the scripts to make, as you say, the secure NT build, would this have been the primary document you would have used?
This would have been one of the documents that I used. I had meetings with Belinda and Barry Proctor to go through a set of rules and requirements, which would then provide the framework that would enable me to shape the NT domain design. So that NT domain design was the start point for the work that I did with Belinda. From the NT domain design document, which in this group definitions for secure NT build document that Alan authored, in the tables that are included in this document, the columns include the domain names, and Alan would have needed those domain names in order to fit the group definitions for the secure roles to build that picture up.
Well, let's look at one of those tables. If we could please turn to page 9. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So it says group name to be implemented on the left, and SSC apps man, that's SSC application management.
Yeah.
And when you refer to you were referring to the domains earlier. Which part of this table were you referring to?
So in this table here, the authentication domain column lists the authentication domains where users accessing those domains are going to be verified in terms of user and passwords.
So could you assist us in decoding what's under the authentication domain column?
So the PWI DCS, that domain name refers to Pathway Data Center Systems. And then the Tuke DLR, SIT DLR, Duns DLR, and Wico DLR refer to domains associated with De La Rue. So there would be FTMS servers located within those 4 subdomains that were used to transfer data between Pathway systems and De La Rue systems.
So for present purposes, really, we're only concerned with the Pathway one at the top. Where it says NT all servers, when you reviewed this document, what did you think that covered in terms of scope?
That would be all NT platforms that were members of any Windows NT domain.
So it would include post office counters?
No, counters were excluded. These are Windows NT platforms that are located in the data centres Wigan and Bootle.
So Mr. Dalvarez in evidence yesterday said that it would include counters. Do you disagree with that?
Yes, I disagree with that.
In the... Well, we can go there, I think. Bear with me, sorry. Actually, I think that it will be hard to bring the document up, but in in the security functional specification, which was shown yesterday, one of the points that was made was that in riposte, a Windows NT workstation was described as a message server, riposte message server. Is your evidence that because of that, this table, it doesn't mean a counter falls within this table, all servers?
That's right. The counters were excluded from the Windows NT domain design.
And but this does include the correspondence server.
The correspondence servers and the agent servers would have been catered for within this design.
Do you have any recollection as to what the Tivoli remote console did?
My recollection of the Tivoli remote console was that it was the device that was used to apply changes to the data center systems.
And to the data center systems, was that, sorry?
Yep.
It's right, isn't it, that it would also be used for to make changes to counters?
I have no recollection of it being used for counters, but my focus and my work was concentrated on delivering for the data centers.
So it wasn't within your remit to look at how the SSC may or may not be able to access counter computers?
Well, I translated the document that Alan has authored here, which is shown on the screen. So the definition of the group name SSC apps man, I took that information and I created Windows NT scripts that would enable that tool set that's listed in the second column on the left under tools, so that those tools could be made available to the secure role SSC apps man. And I would have also created the access control lists, which would have enabled read, write and execute to the folders on the various platforms that are described under NT servers.
Do you know who was responsible for access control as between the SSC, or anyone in Pathway for that matter, and the counter-branch computers themselves?
No. No, I'm not aware of the security fit that was applied to counters.
Given you were based in the security team and you were involved in access control in some way, can we infer that no one was overseeing that aspect, namely whether who had access between the SSC and the counter systems?
I have no knowledge of anybody that was applying the same controls that I was applying to the Windows NT servers that were located in the data centers.
Please could I go to FUJ 3088036. It's a document that's been shown a few times this week. Mm-hmm. It's the Secure Support System Outline Design, dated 2nd August 2002. Do you recall if you saw this document in 2002?
I'm not listed as a reviewer of that document, but I do recall Geoffrey Vane. I do recall working with Geoffrey Vane.
Sorry, Geoffrey
Geoffrey Vane.
Bain, and why is that relevant to this document? Sorry.
I believe that Geoffrey Vane, as the security TDA at the time, would have been involved in this document.
If we could turn the page just to see the distribution list. So yes, Geoffrey Vane, security TDA. Do you recall being, well, let's first go to the page 9, if I may, so we can set out what the document did. So first, SFS. Do you know what that refers to?
I believe that refers to the security functional specification.
So the security functional specification mandates the use of Tivoli Remote Console for the remote administration of data center platforms. And this records an auditable trail of logins to all boxes accessed by the user. It's a matter of considerable discussion and correspondence that TRC is slow and difficult to administer. This has led over time to BOC personnel relying heavily on the use of unauthorized tools, predominantly our client, to remotely administer the live estate. With that context, do you recall having discussions about this document or the issues raised in it in 2002?
I don't recall the discussions in terms of the detail that's included within this document, but I do remember the PWI SAS domain being created and the
So could you just explain what that is? Sorry.
so that would be Pathway Secure Access Server or servers, and then within that subdomain, I remember the EMBO SAS01 and MW SAS01. So those would have been the servers that were hosting the terminal services
And what was the
that
purpose
this
of
design
those?
refers to.
So those domains were created to essentially give effect to the tool proposed here,
Yes,
and you were involved in the creation of those.
I believe so, yes.
And could we please turn to page 19? And if you scroll down a little. This diagram, is that explaining the tool that is being proposed to allow better access, or allow audited access to the counter systems?
Yes, I think that diagram there is describing what we knew as the Sigwin solution.
And could you just explain what that solution entailed?
There was a terminal server, as described on the right-hand side. On the secure access server, there was an SSH client and a similar SSH component logged on.
What's the SSH client?
It was a third-party solution that enabled secure connection between a client and a server, and it enabled certain functions such as the capture of user authentication and the auditing of that logon.
So was this to be used by members of the support services essentially to remotely access counters?
I believe so, yes.
And you say it had it. Well, we can see from the document that there was enhanced or more audit features available. Is that correct?
Yes.
do you know what data was captured for audit purposes?
No.
Was audit not within your domain?
I didn't need to know the detail of data records that were being captured. What I needed to do in that role was to make sure that the development team looking after and making changes to the audit solution were aware of those changes that they needed to code, and my role was to report to people like Pete Druitt and Ian Morrison whether the audit team was on track or not.
So if we can go further down on this document, please. There should be a small, I think it's over the next page, so sorry. Thank you. This is referring to the Secure Support Access Server, SSAS.
Yep.
Can you just assist with what that is?
Well, that is the secure access server that I was referring to.
Right, that's what you referred to.
Yeah.
And the additional security domain, so third line and operational support units have and require system admin access to all systems they manage. In order to create a non-refutable audit of all actions carried out against systems they manage, it is necessary to restrict their access to the system which is gathering the audit. So in essence, is that saying support services shouldn't be able to access the audit data captured through this tool?
Yes.
It goes on, we don't need to read it all, it goes on to refer to a second security domain being required, and changes will be required to the existing security NT domain hierarchy. In the box, it says question for Mark Ascott. Could this be as simple as moving the administration of the PWY DCS user domain to a separate group? Could you please just elaborate on what that question meant?
I think that question is exploring, is there a simple change to the NT domain structure, or is there a more involved change? And the person asking that question, whoever wrote that design note, is clearly looking to me to provide some guidance as to how simple or quickly the change can be made, or is there more complexity required?
And do you recall when this change was made?
I think this is part of the conversations and the work that I would have done with Geoffrey Vane in order to bring this change in. And I think for me, my recollection is that I recommended that we introduce the PWI SAS domain and placed the secure access servers as member servers of that specific domain, that subdomain.
When this tool was developed, presumably it required testing.
Yes, it would have done.
Were you involved in that side of things?
I would have been involved in delivering the changes that introduced the PWI SAS domain and setting up the secure role users and the secure profiles, the access control list. My scripts would have been passed to the PIT team, as it was known then, product integration team, and the first real test for those scripts would have been when the SPTS team, the Service Provision and Test Services group, they were a small team, they were located in Feltham, and they would have used those scripts after the PIT team had wrapped around some deployable scripting to enable the software deployment tools to execute those scripts. So they would have been involved in the testing for real in terms of did those scripts enable the PWI SAS domain to be added to the data center solution.
But do you have any recollection of the results of the testing related to this tool?
No. So in my own testing of my own scripts, I would have desk checked them. I wouldn't have had available to me an equivalent test rig of all of the NT systems and all of the NT domains. So I would have desk checked, and I think there was a technique that I used to use where I could execute the scripts, but using echo to print, if you like, the commands that were being executed. And I would have received those responses back, and I would have then been able to tell whether the logic in the script was doing what I intended it to do.
But that was all prior to going for formal testing.
That's right. So that was my own development testing that I was doing to satisfy myself that the changes were ready to be made available to the product integration team.
And as part of your role in developing this tool and as part of your role in audit, did you have any oversight as to whether or not this tool was being used for the purpose of remotely accessing counters?
No, again, so I'm providing the basis for the platform to be part of the overall domain structure. The application, the SSH application that's sitting on top of that is a tool that I'm enabling the secure role and the users that are created from that secure role to execute. The configuration of the SSH tool itself, I was not delivering that configuration.
I want to ask a few points about something that was raised in evidence with Graham Allen yesterday. Mm-hmm. Did you listen to his evidence?
I did see some of Graham's recording, yes.
And he said that I'm paraphrasing, but the team developing Horizon Online was not able to look at the code for legacy Horizon for intellectual property reasons. Is that right?
Yes, I remember in 2008 when I rejoined Pathway in the test team that there was a lot of emphasis put on the counter team not reviewing or going anywhere near what was the riposte solution for fear of claims that the new HNGX counter that was being developed was a copy or was a facsimile of the riposte system. And that was a message that was regularly mentioned, certainly in 2008. And although the counter development team was located in the Braro 1 tower, and I was primarily working in the test team lab area on the ground floor, the ripples of those types of reinforcing that message would reach down into the test teams.
Are you aware of whether that inability to look at the Legacy Horizon code caused any difficulty or any it held things up when developing Horizon Online?
Again, I wasn't part of the counter development team, so I can't really say, you know, how they went about, you know, like solving the problems of delivering and developing the new HNGX counter. You know, we were very much aware that, you know, there was this. It didn't feel like a directive. You know, you will not go and look at that previous counter design or that previous counter code, but it wasn't far away from that. You know, that the direction was relatively clear that you know, we could, or ICL Fujitsu could be taken to task for, you know, copying riposte. So,
In your role and when working with Legacy Horizon, did you ever have to deal with third-party software suppliers?
can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, of course. So, for example, let me put it another way. I know you didn't work with riposte, but that was a application provided by Escher,
It was.
third party. And the question I ask is, in your roles, did you have something similar where you had to work with a third party outside of Pathway in respect of an application you oversaw within Legacy Horizon?
Well, I would say no to that. I mean, as part of developing the secure role templates, those templates needed to refer to applications and executable files from a range of applications. But yeah, what I was processing was, you know, this is the tool, this is the executable, this is where you can expect that to be located on the NT server or the NT workstation. So if I knew the location of the executable, I could configure that into the secure role template.
So no equivalent then to working with Escher?
I didn't have to have any dealings with any third-party suppliers. In Horizon Online, obviously as part of the volume and integrity test activity, we utilised the Hewlett-Packard load runner toolset, and in order to use that set of tools and applications, we needed to have access to their support desk, you know, when we encountered issues with using that tool. But that was solely for Horizon Online and the HNGX solution.
So I wonder if that might be an appropriate time to have a break.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Sorry about the slight delay, but I was on mute.
Thank you, sir.
So, what time shall we start?
Quarter past. Would
Yeah,
that work?
that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ascott, I've only got one question, really. You said at the beginning of your evidence, which was the start, that when I referred to the 2009 Computer Weekly article, you thought that publications or journalists were biased against ICL. Yes?
Yep.
Do you still hold that view, or have you changed your mind, knowing what you know now about Legacy Horizon?
What I know now from news media organisations like the BBC, ITV, and Sky, I would say yes. Honestly, I'm aware that prosecutions were made that not necessarily should have been. But at that time, I'd had an experience whereby a journalist wrote for our local newspaper that a teenage girl who had been glue sniffing.
Is this relevant to?
Well, it sets my mindset in relation to articles produced by and written by journalists. So for me, my experience in that instance, I take with a pinch of salt what journalists write.
But knowing what, as I say, knowing what you know now, what is your view?
Yes,
of the,
knowing from
the
from the court cases and the judgments that have been passed, now I know differently.
So I have no further questions, but I understand that there are no. I'll just check if there are any questions in the room, sir. No, it's a nil return, sir.
There we are, Mr. Ascott. The questions that have already been put to you are the ones that people want to put. So thank you very much for coming to give your evidence and for answering the questions. And thank you for making your written statement as well. So I take it that concludes this afternoon's business, Mr. Stevens?
That does, sir. We'll be back 10 o'clock tomorrow if that suits you.
Yes, of course. So 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you, sir.